God's grace after our failures. So you might be thinking right now that, you know what? I've messed up. I've messed up big time. I've done things in the past I'm not proud of. I've done things where I don't know if I can come back from that. I don't know if God can forgive me for those things. Today I want to remind you of something very powerful. It's life-changing. Is that even if you've messed up big time, God can still forgive you and use you for very great purpose. Now, I've talked about in the past, obviously, the beauty of forgiveness is not that it's not a get out of jail free card, right? As a born again Christian who believes in God and the Bible and the resurrection of Jesus Christ, he tells us to go and sin no more, right? As a born again believer, we'll be immediately convicted when we sin, and that we're not going to be going out and being like, oh, I can do whatever I want, God will forgive me. That's not the way it works. And so I've talked about that in the past. That's not what today is about. But I just wanted to bring some comfort to those that have messed up in life or feel like they have. We all have. And let you know that God can still use you for a great purpose, and He has the grace to forgive. The Bible is full of stories of people who have failed, and we can learn a lot of things in that from that. A lot of these people, they failed in major ways, but God didn't give up on them. Instead, He forgave them, restored them, and used them to amazing purposes. Take Peter, for example. This is the guy who walked with Jesus, right? Saw his miracles, and yet when it mattered most, he denied even knowing Jesus. He didn't, and he did it three times, right? Talk about a failure. Jesus, Jesus didn't cut off Peter. After his resurrection, Jesus lovingly restored Peter. We're told that in John 21. And then Peter, what did he do? He went on to become one of the most influential leaders in the church. And then there's David. I've actually mentioned this a few times in the past as well. Committed adultery, he lied, he even had somebody killed to cover up his lies. Yet when David repented, God forgave him. Yes, there were consequences. And yes, in life we will have consequences for past actions. Sometimes in this life, maybe in the next. As far as if you're a believer and you're saved and you've accepted Jesus Christ into your heart, it's a loss of opportunities or maybe a loss of rewards in heaven, and we're told. And there's certain things we'll go into that another day. But on this earth, as David did, sometimes there are consequences as well. But God still called David a man after his own heart. Acts 13:22 tells us that. And he used him to literally shape the history of Israel. And then, finally, let's don't forget Paul, right? Formerly Saul. He literally persecuted Christians, killed them, throwing them into prison, approving of their deaths. But when Jesus met him on the road to Damascus, what happened? Everything changed. Paul became one of the greatest missionaries that has ever lived, and he wrote almost, much of the New Testament. So what's the point? The point is, your past doesn't disqualify you from God's future. God is not surprised by your mistakes. He knows you inside and out, and He still calls you. If you're willing to turn to Him, no matter how far you've fallen, He's ready to forgive. He's ready to heal, and He will use you as you never imagined. You should very much take comfort in that. I know I do, right? So if you're sitting here thinking, I've messed up too much, just remember, God specializes in turning messes into missions. He did it with Peter, he did it with Paul, he did it with David, and he can definitely do it with you. All he needs is your yes, your heart. All right. So take comfort in that. I know I certainly do. And we press on towards the mark. So God bless. Thanks for watching today. And I hope you have a great rest of your evening. Take care and God bless.